Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, More Than a Perk, Coaching as a Business Strategy. I'm Alison DiFlorio, and I'm really thrilled today to have two of our fabulous consultants, coaches, facilitators, and two women who really have extraordinary insights and experiences to share with you based on their experiences coaching both for individuals and for organizations. So I want to welcome Cindy Naughton and Ann O'Brien to today's webinar. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Alison. Very happy to be here. Great topic.
I get to serve as the moderator because really these two have the insights and experiences to share. But before we get into some formal introductions so you can learn a little bit more about their backgrounds, I wanted to just give a couple of housekeeping tips for today's webinar. Just so you know, today's webinar is being recorded and we will be sending out a link post the session with the deck and the recording. So please feel free to share this with others in your organization who perhaps weren't able to attend, or others outside your organization who you think may find this of interest. We do have your phones on mute. However, your questions are important to us. So please feel free to use the chat feature to address any of your questions. And we will do our best to get those addressed. And if we can't, then you'll have our contact information at the end and feel free to reach out to any of us after the fact. And other than that, please feel free to enjoy the conversation and add your own experiences with regards to coaching as we move through our presentation today. So with that, I do want to do some formal introductions. Some of you may know me. If not, I'm Alison DiFlorio, co-founder and managing partner of Exude Human Capital. I started the firm about 20 years ago, which is hard to believe, with the lens of how important leadership development is to building strong HR infrastructure and strong senses of inclusion and belonging. And as we talk about today's topic, I think about our executive coaching practice and how we've seen that grow over the years, particularly since the advent of the pandemic and everything that has transpired past then. So it's with that I turn it over to two coaches who joined our practice within the past 5 years and have really done extraordinary work with individuals and organizations. So let me pass it over to Cindy if you want to share a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Naughton. I'm a certified professional coach. My career has been under the HR umbrella, so performance management, change management. I also do strategy work. My favorite topic is coaching because it's amazing when you see the elevation of an individual and what it can do for an organization. I've worked across many industries, all the way from healthcare to manufacturing to life sciences, and even nonprofits and foundations. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm looking forward to sharing my insights with you and would love to hear all your questions. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks, Cindy. Ann.
Thanks, Alison. I am Ann O'Brien, and indeed, I am that person on the far right with the then brown hair. I have since reached the landmark birthday and embraced the white, so there's not been any role reversal happening here. I'm delighted to be here too. Like Cindy, I'm a certified professional coach. My journey's been a little bit different. I've had a long career in the nonprofit sector here in the Philadelphia area in a variety of leadership roles. And made the transition about 5 years ago to doing my own practice, became a certified executive coach. I also do interim leadership work as well as consulting. I was a longtime client of Exude and many of the organizations that I ran. So it's been really delightful to have the opportunity to partner with Alison and Cindy and the team. And I love coaching. I feel like it was something I was born to do and something I've fully embraced and learn so much every day from the clients with whom I work. So I'm just excited about the conversation.
And, I just have to say that I'm the lucky one who walks in to visit our clients, and will have an executive come running up to me who's been coached by one of these women who have said, this has been a life-altering experience. I'm not exaggerating. Those were words that were used to me. So thank you, both of you, for the work that you do with our clients. So that said, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to share today, or what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about that difference between training and coaching, because sometimes the two get confused in the work environment. And both Anne and Cindy do training, group training, and do coaching. So they'll share kind of the distinctions between the two. We're going to talk about some of those key business challenges that lead organizations to think about embracing coaching for leaders or managers. And then we're going to get into what is that strategic value of coaching. So for anyone on the audience who's thinking about how do you position this for your organizations, or how do you think about that? What is that value that you can share with business leaders to the investment in coaching? We're going to distinguish the value of coaching versus training, get a little bit deeper into this. And very importantly, what are the return on investment? How do you actually measure success? And there are various ways that both Anne and Cindy will go through. And we'll share a few proven coaching models. And again, we welcome your questions as we move through our conversation today. We do want to find a little bit out about who is on this call and your experience with training. So our wonderful marketing director in the background, Whitney, is going to post a poll in just a moment. If you would just take a second and respond. What is your experience with professional coaching? Have you never tried it? You've had informal coaching, like from a manager or mentor, you've worked with a professional coach, or you've been part of a group or team coaching program. Just take a moment to vote so we can see what our audience experience is. We should have that little sound, you know, the Jeopardy,
Right.
the Jeopardy song here.
Oh.
Okay, so this is interesting. So we've had a majority, over 80%, have had informal coaching or never tried it, and a little less than 20% have worked with a professional coach. So that's interesting, and no one's been part of a group or team coaching program. So that's interesting, and we are going to talk about both individual and group and group coaching and the benefits and the things to think about with each. But thank you for taking time to respond to that. So let's take a look at just defining coaching versus training. And Anne, I'm going to toss it over to you to just share with the group kind of what are these definitions?
Sure, happy to do it. So the definition we've put out here on the slide that you can see is the coaching is a partnership that helps people unlock their own solutions, build self-awareness, and take meaningful action. I think what resonates for me in this is a couple of things that is important in that. Number one, it is a partnership. When I engage with a coaching client, this is a joint process that we're doing together. And while we offer mentoring and ideas and solutions, a lot of the work that we do as professional coaches is help our clients unlock within them the things that might be blocking them, the things that might be getting in their way, and to maybe get some new perspectives, sometimes to identify blind spots that they might have. And then working closely with the coach to be able to come up with strategies to start to try out and start to try on to change that behavior.
And how about training?
You want me to take that one too?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. So I think I'll read it again. It's a structured process of teaching specific skills, knowledge, or behaviors that improve performance in a job or a task. So a couple of things I tease out that are a little different. One is that it's a structured process. So it's not a partnership driven by the coach together with the client. It is teaching, a very direct, I'm imparting knowledge and information to you. I think in the end game, you've got some similar things in that you are trying to improve performance or behaviors, but it's a different path to get there. And I think the major difference for me is I may start to do things differently when I get training. When I get coached, I start to be different. I start to embrace a different view of who I am and what I'm bringing to it. So those to me, and I'd be curious what my partners think, are kind of a key difference between coaching and training.
Yeah, Cindy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything Anne said. One of the things that going back to coaching for me, and I truly, truly believe this from the bottom of my heart. I got into coaching a long time ago, and this was one thing that was said to me when I was a junior manager. Humans are infinitely capable. And that just stuck with me forever. And when I heard that, that is something that I use in my coaching practice. The tagline is helping individuals and organizations unleash their brilliance, because I truly believe each person is infinitely capable. It's a matter of unlocking that with you. And when you're on a one-on-one or a group cohort or group coaching process, you really have the opportunity to do that. In training, that's sort of more given to you. And so you're absorbing that. In coaching, we're pulling it out. Again, humans are infinitely capable, and I truly believe that all answers are inside of you. It's a matter of just working through so you come to your own conclusions on what would work best for you and yourself.
You know, I want to ask you both just a quick question. Coaching used to have that that reputation of, oh, if they come to me and say, hey, we're going to give you a coach, that means that I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that times have changed and the thought process around that has changed, but how do you respond to that?
So I will take that quickly. One was from when I was a leader and had an employee that was performing the tasks of his job incredibly well, but was having lots of interaction and human relationship challenges. And what I said to him was, I believe in you and you're really good at what you do, but there are these things that are getting in the way. So I want to invest in a coach for you because I believe with some work, you can resolve these situations and you can boost your performance in your job. So I, even as an employer, approached it as a positive, not that we're all good at some things and not as great at others, you know? And I would say a lot of folks that I end up coaching now too are people who are promoted to their roles because they were good at the doing of the job. And now suddenly their role is to grow their staff and to set directions. And they don't always have as much experience in that. So a coach can help someone transitioning into a new role embrace those new challenges and have the support to do them well.
Yeah. Yeah. Alison, I agree with that as well. I recently had a gentleman I was coaching, and he felt it was very punitive. And he's like, if we don't get this right, this is my job. And so, I mean, we had very upfront conversation about that to say coaching is not meant to be punitive.
No.
The goal of coaching is to help you elevate yourself. And when you can elevate yourself, you're going to elevate the organization or at a minimum, your team. And it took a little bit of conversation to get that, for him to actually believe that. Then we finally talked through it. And the way the coaching process works, because it's between the two of us, or if it's a cohort situation, then the group of us, but typically in a cohort situation, you got individual coaching as well. Through that coaching process, in fact, all times easily able to dispel that. And then just on that last example that I gave you, when we had our coaching closeout call, we had it with his manager. Now this was a CFO actually, and we had it with the CEO, and the CEO was just like, this has been amazing for him. I've watched this transformation going, he came into this role because of exactly what Ann just mentioned. He knew how to do all of this stuff. Now he has to lead functions. He's leading rather than doing. And the goal of coaching was to close that gap. So definitely, it's just a real important thing to get out up front. Coaching is not punitive.
Right. And I'm sure we both approach it in that way when we meet that client, to say, isn't it great that your employer sees this potential in you and is willing to invest in you?
Yeah.
So I would agree with that.
Great. So as we think about some of the reasons people may want to invest in coaching, and I've heard you both indicate, somebody goes into a new role or somebody's dealing with, a role change. Just in general, dealing with change management, I think it's fair to say the world has changed. The world's always changing, but in the last 5 years, the pace of change has been accelerated at a pace that most leaders are either experiencing change fatigue or just have no playbook for. Cindy, you want to walk us through some of the other reasons why you've seen businesses invest in?
Yeah. So yes. So, and these are great. That's a great starting list. I think each business is going to have something, a tweak to that, or in addition to that. I've got a one gentleman right now, and it's just so enlightening to see, who wants to work on executive presence. And Alison, you talked about the world changing at the speed of light here. Executive presence, when it comes to competencies, is going to be different in all cultures. So, the goal is, what does executive presence look like for that culture? And then how does it fit this individual? So that's certainly one of them. Another one here is elevating the confidence level of the, whether it's the executive or a manager or just an employee. It's elevating that confidence of them so that they are, and that's another client that I have right now. It's really been a beautiful journey for them. So it helps the business in all of these challenges when you can really get to focus on specifically things like executive presence, things like, my employee group is a little bit tough to manage. How do I do that? And just talking through some of those solutions. And then, I have one executive that is not as, she's confident in her abilities to do her job, but when it comes to talking to the C-suite or the board, and she is a part of the C-suite, it is elevating her, and she has stepped into it with just grace and dignity, and is excelling. So at an individual level, those are some of the things that I have going right now.
Interesting. I would imagine too, and I don't know if you had this experience, but with people dealing with remote and hybrid work, and perhaps having to switch from that traditional leadership where I see you, I have meetings with you, I read your body language, to having to do that over the phone or on camera. Or have you experienced any of that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the many big changes, Allison, that you've mentioned, is that shift to remote work. We're not having those conversations over the water cooler that we used to have. We're not chit-chatting about our weekend and helping coaching clients. I was thinking the one thing that kind of weaves through all of these for me is communication, right? So lots of what brings people into coaching or desire coaching is that there's some gap in communication. Either people are suggesting that I'm not communicating well, either I'm feeling like people aren't hearing me. And I think the remote, helping folks manage people in a remote situation is a lot of that. Really figuring out, how do people get to know each other? How does the supervisor get to build a team when the team is never physically
Yeah,
in one place?
beautiful.
So,
Right, great. All right, so let's get into it. Let's dig a little bit deeper here, and I'm going to ask you to kick us off here.
sure.
Can you really do a deep dive into coaching versus training?
Yeah, and I think that this is so fascinating. We both, I think, all been sort of alluding to it. So the first one, personal growth and insight. Allison, when you talked about like the life-altering experience, I mean, I think Cindy and I have seen huge shifts. Like when you're in a moment with a client and you see them just get this level of awareness and to see something in a completely different way, and to be able to kind of have the awareness and reflect on their own behavior, it's a moment, right? So
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things that happen in a coaching session. And what happens in a training session is that people are like, oh, now I understand this great. So that's good, right? That's a great thing. But they're two different ways of growing and learning. We've talked already about coaching is a partnership. It's a relationship. And it, like all relationships, sometimes takes some time to grow, to build that trust, to get to know one another, to get to understand each other. In typical engagements for us, usually are months, sometimes years, that we continue to work with clients as they grow. I just had a client I talked to this morning that we made great progress, but the whole organization has changed and a big person has been let go and she's got totally new skills. So there's a whole body of new things and new challenges to work on. And again, short term, we go to training. We go for a day, we go for a couple hours. we take away information, but we're not really changed as human beings, right? Coaching is usually in individual leaders. You've heard Cindy refer a lot to groups. Both of us do a fair amount of group coaching. Training is pretty much, I guess, unless you're home doing it by yourself on Zoom or something, training is often done in a group or a team. Coaching is highly tailored to the individual. Cindy, I love what you said about humans being infinitely capable of change. And I think we really form a relationship and get to know people so that every single coaching conversation that we have is different. There's no boilerplate, there's no script that we use because we're really being. I think the one gift of coaching is I am completely present to you for the 45 minutes. There is nothing else in my radar but you. And when you share something with me, I'm not going to say, well, you know what, that happened to me, and let me tell you about it for the next
Yeah.
20 minutes, because everything is focused on the client. Everything is focused on them. And training is, if we're going to train something, we take the same stuff with us no matter where we go. So again, totally different tools that we're using. And then finally, as you probably can all guess, and as we've talked about, we're asking our clients questions because we believe as coaches that the wisdom lies within them. There's just something maybe getting in the way of them unpacking that wisdom or recognizing and appreciating that. So we ask a lot of questions. We may ask clients to, journal about that a little bit this week, or, reflect on that a little bit more. Try this out and see when we come back next time how you're feeling. Again, training is I walk in with my curriculum, right? So I'm going to deliver my curriculum. I want to deliver it the same every single time. Again, really important for learning content and new skills, but a total different modality that uses different skills and talents, I think, of the person delivering it.
Yeah, and I just want to bring out, thank you, Shannon and Sani in the chat, is specifically related to that last point on there. It is very reflective. And, Shannon mentions it's personal to development where training will help me improve skills. Love that. And then in the training or in training, Sani's usually the expert in the content. In coaching, the person being coached is the expert in their own life. I really love the way you said that too.
Yeah,
And
great. Thanks.
I want to pose this because I think, well, I know you both probably had this experience in that they're the expert in their own life. Is it fair to say that in some cases, not always, but in some cases throughout a coaching process with an individual, they may choose to make a different life decision
100%.
with regards
Oh,
to, and when I'm working with organizations and we embark on this, I always say that, not that that's the intention, but, and in the years that we've been doing this, that's not the majority of the cases, but sometimes it helps someone say, perhaps this is not the path that I want to be on.
And that is, and it does, Allison, and it is absolutely fair game. You are the goddess of your own or god of your own life. And the beautiful thing about coaching is when you start to reflect on, what your values are and how it matches where you are in your life, oftentimes different choices are made, and that is perfectly okay.
Mhm.
And sometimes I had a client who came because she was really struggling in a new role in an organization. And where that engagement ended was that she left that role, stayed in the organization, but went to a different role. So that investment on behalf of that business retained that employee in a place where she was much happier within the organization. And through the support of coaching, she was able to come to that awareness, to
Mhm.
not feel like a failure, and just be like, well, I tried this and this is not who I am or what I want to do. And to put her in a role in the organization where she is incredibly effective and happy. So it's a happy ending for everybody.
Great. And I know you both have, before you became coaches and facilitators, you sat in-house and you were making decisions on and building the case for why should we invest in coaching. So Cindy, can you talk a little bit about the strategic value of coaching to an organization?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, helping individuals and organizations unleash their brilliance. So change happens. Let me just, I'll give it to you this way too. Organizations don't change. the individuals within the organization change. And the only way you are going to get an organization to change is if you start with the individual. So and when you elevate an individual and you start elevating groups or multiple individuals across the organization, that really helps the organization elevate, and it starts to build it into the DNA, the culture of that particular organization. So I like to start off by saying that organizations don't change, individuals change. So strategically, when you are looking at coaching on an individual level, what I always like to make sure that we have the conversation about is what is it going to do strategically for your team, your organization, and the future. And so I think it's with that, you can read the slide there. I'm not going to go through this. I won't read through this, but keep in mind that everything that's happening at that individual level is contributing to those organizational benefits. So you are getting an employee that has more awareness. You are getting an employee that is more engaged. They're developing their team better. And even if it's one person, again, that just helps to elevate the team and over time elevate the organization. And what I love to see, and I know we're going to talk metrics later, because this when we're going through a coaching process, we start talking about where they've seen benefits. And oftentimes, managers may be involved in some of the coaching process just for check-in meetings and the closeout call. We talk about where you see some of that benefit at the organization level. And they are literally saying the things that are on the right side of that page there. Most recently, less turnover in a team. The engagement scores and the employee surveys have gone up. I mean, it's a beautiful journey to witness. And it's something I think from strategic HR leaders or strategic business leaders don't necessarily take into account when they think of an individual coaching, which is why I love this slide. And I love saying, it is about the individual to perpetuate change, but there's going to be amazing organizational benefits that go with it.
Great. Anne, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would just say I had it was a CEO of a nonprofit organization whose board wanted to make the investment in training for her because they thought she was doing a great job, but the organization was growing really rapidly. There were a lot of challenges and they wanted her to have that support. And she really, as much as she appreciated it, she felt guilty that it was too much money to be invested in me. And she doesn't feel that way anymore, but what I said to her was the best investment the organization can make in its employees is in you, is in growing you and helping you embrace and grow and develop as a leader. That's going to benefit everybody, not just you.
Because you are infinitely capable.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I love that. And let's talk a little bit about the return on investment. As we're talking about that, investing in the individual, coaching it's an investment. I mean, this does cost money, but it can be money well spent and invested in the organization. So how have you seen organizations measure the impact of coaching?
I think the leadership 360s are really important. A lot of the work, I think probably that both Cindy and I do, will often start at the beginning of a coaching engagement is gathering some data from either using formal tools, and there's plenty of formal tools that we use at Exude to provide 360 data, or even informal, we call them stakeholder conversations, to get a sense of the people around them. Where are they strong? Where do you see? And it's always opportunities to grow, not where are they weak? Like what are some muscles that they're not flexing that you think they really could? And I think we both had the experience of then circling back around at the end of engagement to see what are you observing? And without a doubt, there's always growth. There's always changes in behavior that are leading to changes in performance. Those changes are improving their relationship with people that report to them. So I think those are really important ones. I think the behavioral shifts in individuals, that you can really observe. Oh, it used to be that this is how they interacted with a staff person, but it's totally different. They're now listening, they're engaging, they're not as authoritative as they were before. They've really been able to make a shift. And I always say to people, when you think about maybe someone in your household and that annoying thing they do, like they always leave the glass on the counter instead of putting it in the dishwasher, and you try really hard to change that behavior, and it's a really hard behavior to change. Changing behavior is not easy, right? So having the support of a coach helping you to flex a new muscle to do something different really helps to cement that. And I think we see a lot of that. And I think in some ways that's the best, when you can really observe the change in the person and see how that's impacting the people around them.
It just reminds me of a call I received from an executive sponsor of a practice leader in a legal firm that had received coaching. And I was on my way somewhere and I see this phone call come up kind of randomly. And I thought, oh, this is curious. So I pulled over, took the call, and this executive sponsor said, I just have to tell you, I was skeptical going into this coaching. I wasn't quite sure we were going to be able to help this individual change the behavior. But he said, I cannot believe what we have seen and how happy she is and how happy her team is now.
Awesome.
So those are those unsolicited comments that, that measure the impact of the investment. Cindy, do you want to add anything to that?
I would like to just add, I'm one example on the 360. I'm conducting a closeout coaching session on Friday for an executive that I started coaching with in 2022. So we did a 360 in 2022. We did one in 2024. It was at the end December 2022. So skip 23, did one in 24, and then did one just this past April. And when you can lay those out and see that progress just on that individual basis, it is, I mean, she's blown away by her own self. And that is just so endearing to hear. And then we'll have a closeout call with her boss who has been raving, starting about 15 months ago. Just like you're saying, Alison, the change has been amazing. The way that the organization is now performing as a leadership team. And then another just quick, very proud moment for me. There was another individual I was coaching who literally our very last coaching call, she talked about a dream that somebody had called her, and she's like, it's always been my dream job. I said, hold on, why are you not going after it? And she's like, well, I can't leave here because I have kids and the kids are in school and, all these other excuses. So we talked through it. And I said, listen, let's have another call pro bono. I want to get on the phone with you, find out where this goes. She says, I'll research it. In 2 weeks' time, she had researched the firm, done the financials on the firm, had her boss talk to who she would potentially go partner with. And then in 2 weeks' time, she says, I think I'm going to do it. Now, how about that? Now, here's the kicker. This was, by the way, about 16 to 18 months ago. I picked up this random podcast. She's a finance person. So I picked up this random podcast and said, time to educate yourself on some stuff. Don't you know that very first podcast that I listened to was her giving financial advice? I mean, it was just, and then they're like, oh, this is so-and-so. And I'm like, wait a minute, who? And then she gave her background and I'm like, yeah, it was just, and there she is doing her dream.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So
That's a wonderful success story.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You've both alluded to kind of not really talking through your process, but the different models that are out there. And I know working with the two of you, you both do individual, you both do group coaching, you both work with organizations that are embracing a coaching culture, starting with executives and now kind of using it as part of their succession planning throughout the organization. So
Yeah.
I wonder if, Cindy, you want to kick off here and just talk about the different coaching models, and I'll invite you to chime in as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the two big ones, and I will tell you, and I have been a part of all of these. So as coaches, you go through coaching. I mean, it's like it's like getting your pilot's license. You have to go through X number of hours of coaching. For me, right, one-on-one executive coaching really allows that personal touch, just like Shannon and Sonny are talking about in the chat there. You really have this opportunity to, peel back the onion in places you want to go. As a coach, our job is to read that situation and be very gentle about it. The on-demand and micro coaching, this is Alison, this was a former client of ours. We had finished the engagement, and I haven't coached him now for about 3 or 4 months, but guess what? He needed help with something, responding to something, reached out to me. And even though we were no longer under agreement, as a coach, I tell everyone, listen, if you get stuck, you call me, let's go through it. And so your coach, most coaches that I know would be available to you like that. And that was so amazing. The one experience I do want to tell you, especially if you're thinking about this strategically for your business, and this is really what elevated my coaching practice. I was part of a year-long coaching process for our entire organization. Our goal was to use common nomenclature across the organization and elevate the leaders so that they can lead and create succession plans for the appropriate people in their organizations. So we would each have one-on-one coaching with an executive coach. Then once a month, we do a 2-hour group cohort coaching. Then with a coach, and then we would do peer coaching with each other, all with a formal agenda for each one of those. And it was a year-long process, and what a beautiful way it was to cement really individual and organizational benefits in the organization.
And I think when I'm thinking of a common client that you both share through Exude, and how that organization is probably on year 3 of coaching, maybe at least 3 years, and they've they're trickling this down throughout the organization, but there are those benefits of
That's it.
the trickle down. If I'm receiving coaching, and then I'm more likely to apply some of that technique to those that I lead, et cetera,
I think that's a really important one, Alison. I'm thinking of a client too that I worked with, where the whole leadership team did 360s in coaching. And of course, because they did 360s, it was public in the organization. And what was wonderful about it was that everybody could talk about it. So I encouraged my clients, say, talk to your direct reports and say, I really appreciate your feedback. Here's 2 things I'm working on. I would love for you to be in that process with me. So it creates an environment organizationally that we're all growing and learning. None of us are perfect at that's why I often say to people, raise your hand if you're absolutely perfect at your job. Nobody raises their hand because none of us are, right? We always have we're like, I always say professional athletes are constantly practicing. Why? Because there's always ways to grow. There's always new challenges. There's always opportunities to flex different muscles that enable us to have different impact. So I think that's an interesting impact in City that you kind of referenced around when things are happening organizationally. It's not just one person being plucked out. It creates a whole culture of coaching and development and growth, which I think is really amazing. And I also love the micro. I do that for even all my current clients. I'm like, you don't have to wait till the next time we talk in 3 weeks. If something either just happened that blew your brains, or something's coming up that you just want to wrestle with it for 15 minutes on the phone, like call me. Like you, I say, I'm your coach almost 24/7 for the rest of your life. I'm around if you need me. So say it similarly, lots of different ways and to go about it, to all in the interest of growing, of supporting leaders.
So let me ask you this, because here we have peer coaching circles and internal versus external coaches. Let's talk about internal and peer coaching. What do you say to the organization that wants to do this internally? What sort of preparation or things do you need to think about before you turn this over to individuals who perhaps haven't had any formal coaching training so that it is successful?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's a bit of a tricky question, because the number one thing that has to happen if you're using internal teams, which in my previous life under the HR umbrella, we have stood up internal teams. Trust has got to be number one. And that sometimes can be a slippery slope when it comes to trying to match people with each other. Where it's been wildly successful is when you're creating these mentor type relationships, but you're helping them with coaching skills. This is where the grow coaching model really comes in internally and for organizations. And then, but it is a rigorous process. You have to be disciplined about it. And when your day job takes over, so this is the big piece of this too, Alison, that I would say, your day job takes over, things like this sort of fall by the wayside. So unless you can devote the resources, time, and energy to sustain that, it's a little bit tricky to do. So trust is number one, and then there's some logistical and administrative stuff that you would have to keep up. Plus, measure the return on investment, which you certainly can do, but then that discipline about keeping it going as well.
Mm-hmm. Anne, any thoughts there?
No, I mean, I think Cindy did a really good job at describing that because it's tricky. I think one of the benefits of being the external coach is we don't have skin in the game, right? We don't have bias, even unconscious biases that we might be bringing to it around somebody and how they interact or where I work in the organization. So I think undertaking that model would require, as Cindy alluded, a lot of support of the people doing it to be able to have a high level of awareness, to be able to tease those things apart. And I think to keep it a priority, because you're absolutely right. Then all of a sudden the day job, right? The urgent takes over for the important and off you go. Whereas when you've got an external coach, those meetings are happening because we got them on the calendar and we stay with it and we're able to do that and keep it as a priority.
And Alison, if I can just add one more comment to that. Thank you, Anne. When I talked about our year-long program, we actually had an external organization come in and set that up for us and then take us through the first 12 months. Once that was done, now we've created these habits within the organization, then I took the program over. But it was part of our DNA. Remember, part of our DNA, part of our goal of that was to coach each other, to create succession paths for people, and to create a common nomenclature in terms of high-performing team. So that the way it was set up there worked well because now I became part of the coaching cycle with them, but I was able to build trust along the way because we all trusted each other by the end of 24 months or 12 months. And then I was able to take that program over. So, it's a great example of how it worked very well.
It sounds as though it was very thoughtfully planned.
Correct.
And is it fair to say not everyone makes a good coach?
Yes, I would say that's 100% fair to say. However, what I will say to that is that when it comes to talking to your peers, each one of your peers does have something to contribute. That was very evident in our cohorts.
Yeah, that was the one thing I was gonna add. I think we both do team and cohort coaching, and suddenly there's a room of coaches because the colleagues are maybe asking a provocative question that I didn't think to ask as the coach. So it's not as if the coach is the only person doing the coaching in a group situation. Everybody starts to grow that skill.
That skill.
And is able to play that off. So that's kind of another benefit, I think, of the comment. Much of what Cindy and I do is kind of a combination of group and individual, and then plus it grows that team cohesiveness and it grows trust.
Great. Wonderful.
Oh, you're on mute.
How did that happen?
Oh no.
Uh-oh, AI is taking over my ability to moderate here. Well, Anne, I'm going to ask you to lead off and take the first few of these and just kind of summarize what we've talked about. But I'd love everyone to leave with these kind of key thoughts about if you're thinking about instituting coaching for yourself or for your organization, what are some key things for you to think about?
Yeah, I think as I kind of look at the 30,000 foot here, the one thing I think a takeaway is if you're trying to change a behavior, you probably can't train yourself out of a behavior or train an employee out of a behavior. You can't keep sending them to how to be a good supervisor training. If it really are some behavioral challenges, but a leader, coaching isn't just for leaders. I have a client right now, first time ever being a supervisor. And let's just say that he has had some challenges in supervising, is very detail oriented, very exacting, and believes that their job is oftentimes to point out errors pretty constantly and consistently. And as we all know, some personal styles don't deal with that as well. So this is, again, young junior employee, first time supervising, had a disc, had huge ahas about their behavior and the impact of that on other people, and that other people have different styles. And that's influencing how they are going about the hiring of the replacement employee, and that we're hopefully going to make this be a good situation. So I think anybody in a level, it doesn't have to be the CEO, can benefit. And I think that the skills that this young leader, emerging leader, will grow are just going to have such an opportunity to flourish as they continue in their career. So that's the first thing that jumps out of my mind is you can't train yourself to be a different person. You can coach yourself to, get a greater awareness and really deeper understanding and insight into your behaviors and why they're there, and then to have the support to change them. So I think that really jumps out at me. And I think too, the coaching solves business problems. And we alluded to that a little bit earlier. Although I will say, having said that, the one employee that I mentioned to you that I brought a coach in for, one of the things that he said to me at the end of the engagement was, "My wife and my children, thank you," because they have seen significant changes even in the way I'm interacting with them because of this heightened awareness I got around the impact of the way that I said and did things. So, that's a kind of nice little bonus. But as we alluded to earlier, you're not just, this organization isn't just, changing this one individual. They're going to change the people that he works with, the people that work for him. They're going to keep him hopefully as an employee and give him the skills he needs to continue to grow and to be part of a really flourishing, successful business.
That's
So.
great. Cindy, do you want to talk about just some takeaways on the measuring?
Yeah,
And
and that's really important. Coaching is an investment. It's an investment in the individual, it's an investment in the organization. And for those of you that are thinking about coaching at the organizational level, elevating that organization, I think it's really important to say, you know what, if we implement a coaching program across our leadership or any employee group for that matter, what do we want or need the organizational benefits to be? And so then we as coaches actually can help make that happen as well. So I think, and listen, it can be very tangible. You can measure the outcomes of coaching, both at the individual and the organizational level. So the first thing is, that's the thing that I ask all the time, especially if I'm talking to an organization about the benefits. Like, what are the benefits you want to see? And then we can tailor it to it. And then we talk about how you can track that. And you see some of the examples on there: employee engagement, performance shift. I mean, and that's a beautiful example you gave about, my family thanks you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If that family's feeling it, that organization's feeling it as
yeah,
well.
exactly.
Retention and internal mobility. I mean, those are just a few. There's plenty of stuff you can measure. And what I love, just Alison, just even the way you wrote that on there, if you can't measure it, you can't maximize it.
Mhm.
So important conversation to have, especially you in leadership positions that are in charge of maybe the opportunity to implement coaching in your organization.
Yeah,
I,
and I just want to add, just you're curious in your take. I mean, I see we do a lot of work in performance management, and I see competencies on leadership, evaluations. I mean, that's another area that you can highlight or identify competencies to develop or
yeah.
influence or impact for
Yeah.
a coaching engagement.
Yeah. The one right now, that I'm working with, the gravitas, the executive presence, that's easy to measure because that's what we talk about. And then guess what? He's going to go and speak to the board or speak to his leadership and come back. And number one, I can tell you right now, the very first thing he talks about is the confidence he had to do it. That elevates, right? That
Sure.
elevates the competency you already have.
Sure.
And I think too, and it's probably a little harder to measure directly, but the cost of turnover, right? So if I can retain that new supervisor who in his role and grow him, but also if I can retain the people that work for him, right? Because the impact of the supervisor often causes retention problems of the people who report to them. So I think that's another important thing to think about. The investment in coaching can be have a great return if you can avoid turnover costs, because we all know how expensive that is.
And we know that training has a place in organizations, as does coaching. So
Yes.
make sure you know the difference, right? It's interesting because sometimes I'll have individuals or organizations come to me and say, well, we're having challenges with this one particular manager, so we're going to do management training for everybody. And
Right.
I always say, well, let's step back a little bit. Let's think about what we just said here. And in some cases, yes, baseline training does matter, and that's important. But any thoughts from either of you on that?
I guess, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing supervisory training. I think anybody that's getting in any kind of a leadership or supervisory role for the first time should get that. I think too often we just think because they're great at that, they will be. That's a challenge. But I think whenever you do, I mean, I just will reiterate, whenever you're dealing with some specific issues with one person, deal with it. But it's very possible to have a very productive conversation with that person. I wonder sometimes if that's the resistance, right? Well, we'll just give it to everybody because I don't want to say, Joe, I'm noticing some things, but you can say that in a way that is very supportive and leaves the employee actually feeling good, that because they'll probably be the first one to say, like, I know, oh my God, that's like, I'm really dying here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. At least that's been the experience that I have so many times with folks that I work with.
Yeah, and Alison, from my perspective, you're speaking to an L&D person as well. Training is critically necessary for the skills. And the way that I would differentiate that is once you've been trained in whatever the organization wants you to be trained in, what coaching can help you do is use that training to your style. So it says there, coaching builds insights. So not everybody's walking out doing that training the same way it was done in class. They're using their own style and their own body and leadership. What's the word I'm looking for? Leadership. I want to call it a halo, but I forget. Anyway, they're using their own leadership to implement those skills, and that's the thing I love about coaching. Is it because it's all about you. It's getting what's inside of you and bringing your best foot forward the way you want it to be done.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask each of you to chime in on this last one. We called this session not just a perk, coaching not just a perk, and I've heard both of you use the word purpose and even setting up the ROI. So, Cindy, you want to lead us off and just tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah. So for me, it is about, again, it goes back to that organizations don't change, individuals change. But if you need that, if you're looking at to elevate your organization, um, what is it you want to elevate? And so if we start with that, we start with the why and maybe even a why now. And then what I like to get into is why now, organizational and individual benefits. That creates a beautiful framework for a coach and training for that matter, by the way, because now you can complement the two really well. But that creates a beautiful framework to go in as a coach at an individual level, knowing that the purpose is to elevate the organization in these particular ways. So that's what it feels. That's what it looks like for me, Alison.
Right.
I will just add, I had one client that their why was they always do these 360s, and the HR leader said, I've had 360s. And then I get no help after, like, okay, that's great. Here's my strengths, here's my, so what do I do next? And it was really important to her, if they were going to do 360s in their organization, to say, we're also going to give you some coaching, so that once you go through that process, once you get that feedback, you're also going to get a certain amount of coaching sessions to begin to implement those changes. I think it's kind of like training. We all go to training sessions and we take great notes, and then we close the book and we put it away, right? So I think it's a way too to keep alive an investment that the organization might be making.
Yeah, and I think that's both of those are really interesting observations, but doing a 360 is it's raising self-awareness, and it's a wonderful tool, but
Yeah.
so what? Now what
Yeah.
do you do with it, right? So
Now what do I do, right?
right, exactly. So, I want to invite our listeners to share any final questions that you may have as we just wrap this up. But I also want to thank Cindy and Anne for two things, certainly for being a guest on today's podcast and for sharing your insights and experiences, but also for being adding such transformational change into the organizations and the individuals that you work with. So on behalf of everyone at Exude, and all of our clients, we thank you for that. And for all of our guests on today's podcast, we hope that you can take some of this information back to your organizations. Our contact information is here, certainly. And Cindy and myself would be happy to chat with you as you're thinking about embarking on this in your organizations, or if we can share any insights that you may find helpful. Let me just see if we have any final questions here. I don't see anything final, but I want to thank everybody who did contribute their questions. And again, please reach out if you have any additional questions. And on behalf of everyone at Exude, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Good to be with you, Alison and Cindy. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.